to hear requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use permit requests, and to discuss appeals from the decision of the staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance, and to then make decisions in such matters. The members of this board are citizens of the city of Des Moines and have been appointed to this board by the city council. The board members are volunteers and receive no compensation for their public service. I'll go ahead and introduce our board and staff members who are present here today. We do have a full board. Good to see everybody. Nathan, thanks for getting my memo on dressing.
Yeah.
On the board, or the audience's right is John Chido. Next to him is Dave Gare. Next to him is Lynn Carlson. On the audience's left is Nathan Blake. Next to him is Cindy Smith, and next to her is Marlis Jones. I'm Mel Pins, the board chair. I'll introduce our city staff that will be assisting with the hearing procedures today. On my left is the city's legal counsel, Glenna Frank. And here in the front row on the audience's left is Bert Drost, city planner, Catherine Dostart, city planner, and will Sue Ann Donovan be joining us? Okay. Often our zoning enforcement officer, Sue Ann Donovan, joins us, but we'll see. She's not here at the moment. What I'm going to do here is go through our procedure. For those of you that have never been here before, I'll kind of give you the monopoly rules of how this works, but on each hearing item, we'll help you through the process. So there's no points taken off if you don't understand the hearing procedures. We'll help everybody get through this. First and foremost, this is an open public meeting, but it is a formal legal process. The hearing is being recorded. We should be broadcasting live right now on the city's public information channel, and you can see us late night in reruns as well. The board members have received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendations. Copies of the agenda as well as the staff recommendations are available in the tray right outside the door here. So when I'm through with my opening remarks, if you haven't grabbed an agenda yet, feel free to step up and do so. This board is required to base its decision in each case upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report, and if the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each appeal will be announced in order, and the staff will first present a brief explanation of the appeal. Any written comments received by the staff prior to the hearing will be distributed to the board or otherwise identified during the staff's presentation. The appellant or a representative of the appellant will then be allowed to speak first. They will be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. Anyone present in support of the appeal will then be allowed up to 5 minutes each to present their comments. Following that, anyone present in opposition to the appeal will be allowed up to 5 minutes each for their comments. The applicant will then be allowed up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal if there are any opposition comments. All speakers are requested to speak only from the podium here at the front left and to begin their presentation by giving both their name and address. If you're here in a professional capacity as a consultant or an attorney, you can give your business address. If you're here as a resident of the city with your own interest, you can give your home address. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are asked to ensure they're respectful of time considerations, and if necessary, the board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. The board will close any further public comment on each agenda item after testimony has been presented, and the board will immediately deliberate the request, and we will make a decision here today. If your appeal is approved, we ask that you wait until about Wednesday of next week if you would need to go to the Permit and Development Center for any necessary building permits, so that the decision of this board can be documented in the form of a decision and order and provided to you as well as relevant city staff. Any appeal that is approved by the board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision by this board, or such approval shall expire. And for our agenda, items listed on what's called the consent portion of the agenda, which is the first segment of the agenda, they will not be planned to be individually discussed. They will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the contained staff report, unless there's an individual present here in the audience or a member of this board that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and separately considered under the public hearing agenda. And I'll come back to that in a couple minutes. Finally, the decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Polk County District Court. So if you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the district court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong or need amendments, you may petition the city council to change those regulations for future considerations. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. And just a couple housekeeping items, we would ask that you please avoid any undue conversation in the audience so as to not be disruptive or distracting from the hearing that is in progress. And so far, you're doing a fine job. We ask that you ensure your cell phone has been silenced. Again, kudos on that. And if you need to use a restroom, you can leave through the main doors here. Just past the staircase to the right, there are restrooms. You don't have to go downstairs. And once the agenda item you're interested in has been completed, you are welcome to leave the hearing. So, speaking of agenda items, again, we have, I'll just ask Bert to step up here. Bert, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, are no changes to today's agenda.
Okay, all right. We have 2 items on the consent agenda, and as I referenced, staff has recommended approval of these items, subject to staff recommendations, and I'll review them briefly. If anybody here in the audience has a concern with those, or if you are the applicant, you have a concern with the conditions the city wants to apply for those approvals, if you've got a concern at all, please raise your hand, and we'll hear these items through regular testimony. Otherwise, we're going to plan to approve them, hopefully. First of all, I'll list them off. Item 1 is a special permit request from the city of Des Moines at 2600 Hartford Avenue. Is there anybody here with a concern about that item? Okay, seeing none. Item 2 is a special permit request, also for the city of Des Moines in the vicinity of Southeast 14th and Hartford Avenue. Anybody here with a concern with that one? Okay, any concerns on the board? Seeing none, would there be then a motion to look at approving the items for approval on consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, so moved by Nathan, second by John. All right, all those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so signage and arches related to the county soccer complex has been approved. Great addition to our city. Okay, so that ends the public, or the consent agenda items. So our first item for a full hearing is item 3. That's a request for an amendment to exceptions as well as a variance request at 2650 East Peyton Avenue.
I'll present and then you'll have 10 minutes after I'm done. So item number 3 is a request at 2650 East Peyton Avenue. They're proposing to build a single-family house in the middle of this existing lot. Just for a point of reference, there's the Prairie Hills Assisted Living Facility just to the east here. However, there is a narrow strip of land in between the subject property and Southeast 27th Street. So they're proposing to access the new house by a driveway from East Peyton Avenue. If this looks sort of familiar, it's because last year there was an item on the agenda on this hearing to allow construction of a single-family house in this configuration. They're hoping to be able to put a driveway here to Southeast 27th Street across that narrow outlot. However, they've been unable to secure the rights to cross that, so they are back to the drawing board. This is the plan that they're looking at this time. Again, the driveway would come from East Peyton Avenue to the south, all the way back. They are wanting to have a gravel driveway, so they're wanting a variance of the paving requirement. And then they're also needing to amend their 2 exceptions that were granted last year that would have allowed for a house here oriented towards Southeast 27th Street. So again, this is what they're proposing. I'll show you a design of the house that they've submitted. So it's a attractive single-family house. And then I do have the floor plan that I can reference later if needed. And then these photos are actually taken from last year. Eric didn't have a chance to go out and get new photos, but they actually show what it looks like when there's foliage on the trees. This is the narrow strip coming from East Peyton Avenue where the new driveway would go. And then these photos are taken from Southeast 27th Street that show the lot is heavily wooded. And then here's the consent map. We actually didn't get any cards back in support or opposition. So, from staff's perspective, for one, I'll just start out, we're not in support of the gravel driveway. As you know, we always recommend that single-family houses have paved driveways. That limits the amount of mud and dirt that gets tracked into the city streets. And we are also not too fond of this layout where the house is smack dab in the middle of the property. We liked this original layout better, which preserves the ability for future homes to be constructed. Right now it's a 1.6 acre site, which, you know, in the city that is a pretty large lot, so we feel that it could be subdivided someday. And we do understand their plight right now that they're not able to get the access from East Peyton Avenue. So I guess we still would like to see a house oriented towards Southeast 27th Street. We realize that there's still the need to have the driveway come in from Peyton for now, but we would like to see a house built so that maybe someday they could reconfigure the driveway so that it comes off of Southeast 27th Street and it leaves the ability for at least one or two other houses to be built on that same property as well. So,
Whose approval were they not able to get to link up to?
I could let the
Southeast
applicant
27.
say that the ownership groups has the name of like Atlas Real Estate Group.
Okay, it's a private-
I believe
it's
it's
a private
the same
entity.
group that owns the Prairie Hills.
It's a private entity, though, not
Yeah,
government.
it's a private entity. It's
Okay.
not owned by the city. And I talked with some people this morning because I was really trying to figure out how that narrow strip of land was created there. And they said that when that was done, it was this group here was responsible for constructing for the entire price of constructing that street. And so they did this narrow strip here so that, you know, future people who would benefit from their investment would have to purchase
So they're the
some land
gatekeeper
from them
then.
in order to recoup
Yep.
some of the construction
I see.
costs for Southeast 27th Street.
Uh,
I guess that's a little bit of the backstory, but our recommendation really is to deny the variance of the paving requirement and then to approve amendments to the previously granted exceptions, subject to several, about 11 conditions. And I won't go through all of them, but the main ones are condition number 2, which would say that the front facade of the dwelling needs to be within 25 feet of that property line, the east property line, which means that the house would have to be rotated to face Southeast 27th Street and to be within 25 feet of that line. Right now, since this is a side property line for zoning purposes, they'd be able to construct it within 7 or 10 feet of that property line as a side yard setback. But staff's recommending that it be constructed no more than 25 feet from that front property line. And then the other condition I'll touch on is number 4, which says provision of a minimum attached 2-car garage or a detached garage, provided it is on the west side of the dwelling, and a paved access drive shall be required. So if they would, take this existing floor plan and face it towards Southeast 27th Street, there really isn't a way to make it work with the driveway. So they would, if you go with our staff recommendation, have to find a different floor plan that either has a side-loaded garage or a rear-loaded garage, so. And the rest of the conditions are fairly standard, so I won't go through those, but do you have any questions for me?
I can see that it's just hard to read, but I can see that there are distance measurements on kind of the right side of this. I guess what I'm wondering is, between each of them, does that say 100 in these 3 sectors?
You saying these here?
Yeah.
I think it was originally platted as 3 100-foot
Okay.
lots, so it's
And it's an
300.
R80 district?
R180.
R180. Okay.
Bert, they would have the right on their own if we didn't have these issues with the driveway and the side yard and everything. They'd have a right to plunk their house in the middle of their parcel if they otherwise so choose to, right?
They would, but it would have to face a public street.
Right, right. But kind of like I've often said, the quid pro quo, which is if you want something, I want something. If staff is willing to grant some variances, you'd like to see the house positioned a little different or closer to a lot line than sat right in the middle.
Yeah,
right?
we just feel that, to preserve future development potential, that it would be better
Right.
at this time to orient a house.
But it's not truly subdivided with a legal description into those sublots, is it?
Right, yeah.
Or
and there's
that would have
nothing
shown
we
on
can
your
really
map.
do to force them to divide it into 2 or 3 lots for future
Okay,
development.
well, got you.
I guess I don't understand why you're recommending that it be so close to the east property line. I mean, I can kind of understand, I guess,
Yeah.
the recommendation that, like those, it kind of almost looks like 3 lots, right, that are stacked on top of each other right now, if you look at it. But this is right in the middle of the middle lot, and lots of people build their houses farther away from a road. I guess
Right.
the 25-foot requirement seems,
Well, it's about 20 feet from the curb along Southeast 27th Street to this property line, and so we felt that, if you add 25 onto that, then you're already 45 feet back from the front property line, and the city likes to keep houses within 50 feet of a front property line at least.
And I think, Bert, in prior conversations, please correct me if I'm wrong, part of the discussion was that if those lots were to be subdivided, then you have to have access to the northernmost lot. And so if there's a house in the middle of the 3, you could potentially access, you wouldn't be able to necessarily,
Right.
you may be able to access the southernmost lot. You wouldn't the northernmost lot, and if you're trying to still access from Peyton rather than Southeast 27th. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true too. If say they would build 3 houses here, you could conceptually have a single driveway coming from East Peyton that would provide access to all 3 houses from the rear.
from the middle.
But
Yeah, from the
again,
middle, which
but are
isn't
we-
ideal. But
Yeah.
are we still getting into theoretical things? I keep seeing there's this division and these lots,
Right.
but are these legal things or are these like, hey, this is a connect the dots if I might kind of
yeah,
thing?
it's all theoretical. I know the
Okay.
current owner, I can't imagine they have any intent of
Wanting to
selling
do
off a
that.
portion of the property, but
Right.
perhaps a future owner would be more interested. But
All right.
You're looking at it from a density standpoint.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
What other examples do we have where someone that has built a street's holding the neighbors hostage for having access
I
to
can't
it?
ever think of another example like this.
Yeah, because I can't think this is precedent setting. I
No.
would think this is kind of almost an orphaned piece of land.
Yeah.
Because even if they wanted to build more houses with more driveways, they can't get to Southeast 27th anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's
we will
staff-
get to you, sir. Just hang tight. Because you're bouncing around over there. We're kind of grilling staff for the moment, and then we'll give you your opportunity. So hang tight.
Yeah, so to be honest, I don't think we would approve something like that today, but
Right.
I don't know. I don't, to be honest, I don't know how it got approved 10, 15 years ago, but
Okay.
So how come they don't have?
When did you start
access?
working here?
How come they don't have,
John?
how come they don't have access from Southeast 27th?
there's a strip of privately owned land that separates it from Southeast 27.
Right.
Give them access since they want to buy part of the
I'll
road.
let the applicant address why they're unable to secure an easement across that. It could be that the property owner is uninterested or they just can't agree to a price.
Is 27th a public road or a private road?
It is a public road.
And Bert, the little,
Well, then how,
I should say the long skinny swatch of property, is that
Doesn't make
owned by this person?
It's, right now it's owned by a different LLC than the Prairie Hills. So right now there's like a Prairie Hills entity that owns the assisted living.
Okay, no, but I'm talking about the driveway swatch, not the East 27th swatch.
The south driveway?
Yeah, that driveway,
That's part of their
that,
lot.
is that owned by those two property owners and they'd have to get an easement to get in through there, or?
That's part of the lot in question.
Okay, so that's all owned by?
Yeah, this is
Oh, okay.
Yep.
one tax parcel right now.
And it comes out where it stops, that's the public right-of-way in this case for Peyton to the south.
Right.
Yeah, this is unique.
Yeah,
Haven't seen one of
when
these yet.
this lot was created, it was still within unincorporated Polk County. It's been
Oh,
in
that's
that
who we
configuration
blame.
for quite a while.
We blame Chris Veer.
There you go.
And
Who I
the
know.
properties around this, there's some larger properties obviously around that you can kind of see the deep
Yeah.
yards, the big yards.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Bert? All right, thank you, sir. Now we'll get to the applicant or the representative of the applicant. So how this works, we need your name, address, and you've got up to 10 minutes to present your appeal. So go ahead.
Yes, sir. My name is Alan Sprinkle. I'm with CCS Homes. I'm representing Rodolfo Costanda Munoz. 2635 Berkshire Parkway in Clive is my office address.
Cool.
I would like to start with the, and I don't know how to put your piece of paper. There you go. Okay, so it starts here. I've been in touch with the company that has that 5 foot, because literally there's a 5 foot piece of ground. So I got the cities, there's a 20 foot tree conservation easement, and a lot of those trees were dead. I walked it with the city's arborist a year and a half ago. We walked it and said, all these trees are dead, take all these out. We don't want that locust anyway, get rid of that. We had that all worked out. Then I met with the city, both of them are retired now, so the arborist and the other person have both retired, but I met with another person from the city.
more.
We walked the ground. There's 5 foot that's owned, so the city owns the sidewalk, owns the parking pad area. They own a 5 foot piece of ground, and then starts the conservation easement. And so then I was in touch with the people that own that 5 foot piece of ground. It started a year and a half ago. I started talking with I got moved up to a vice president out in Baltimore, and ended up speaking with the attorney of the company. The attorney said, we'll look into it. Didn't hear anything back. Got in touch with him again. That attorney was left that company. A new attorney was hired. And then again, looking into it, sent him all the new documents again, everything. They went through it and said, no, we're still looking at it. We'll get back to you. And I had to sign letters saying we agree to pay for the land, we agree to pay for the, just let us know how much, we agree to pay for all legal fees and transferring just that easement, we agree to write up the easement, whatever that legal fee would cost, we agreed to all expenses, and we sent letters every time they'd ask for something new. Then, July of this year, I called their office again, not getting an answer still, and they've fired everyone. So the vice president that I'd been talking to is gone, and the attorney that was working on it at that point was gone, and they had a new representative. And that's a local person, that's a property manager for them. The property manager, he met with me, we looked at everything, and he said, shouldn't be that hard. He started calling people, and it took him 3 weeks, and he had an email to me from the company saying, we are not going to relinquish, we want that to stay clean, and we don't want any driveways going through there, so we are not relinquishing any ability to put a driveway in that area. That's where we started coming back to here to restart.
Okay.
Okay, this land, as far as the city would not allow the developer, if you go back into the original documents about 20 years ago when the person started subdividing this ground, he started dividing the piece above it, which here, this piece up here as well. Since then, he was dividing that whole thing, and he did not want to bring the sewer in from wherever it was supposed to come from. That centerpiece on this map, that centerpiece between them was going to help bring city sewer and all those type of things through. He was not willing to do any of those things, and so then all of his development went away. He sold the piece of ground back here to a guy that planted a bunch more trees. He can get in off from, you can see up there, Hart Avenue is a dead end right now.
Yep.
And he can come in off of that street into his property because he owns that parcel. and he, with that piece, he's planted a row of trees between the two property lines, on that yellow line right there. He planted an additional row of trees on that property line, no access, and then we even asked if that was possible to go in there and come back up, and that would have been a 400-foot driveway through his property to get an easement into that property. So, no, not interested in doing so. With that being said, now where we are today. The reason we moved the house is, as you can see by looking at this, each one of those parcels that can never be developed, and that was the thing with the city. In order to do this type, they would have to get sewer and water into this area. We have to pay, it's a septic system area still at this point because sewer has never been brought into it. That would make the driveway almost 500 feet long to put the house in the location where it is. That's a long driveway. Even with owning the acreage back here, coming up this driveway, that 22-foot segment that he owns right there, in itself, this piece is 200 foot long. And that's after the road, so you've got the approach where the road is, and then where his property line starts is 200 feet. So plus the 150 we were doing to the house, that's 350 foot of driveway still. So what we were talking about to the city was, if we put in a concrete approach and concrete for a reasonable distance of 15 or 20 feet to make sure the mud issue is not an issue. So knowing that his property is only 22 foot wide, a 16 foot wide concrete tapered up with dirt on the sides, and make that approximately 20 foot in along with the approach and the stuff from the city, so that's concrete, and then put DOT mat down and put the road stone over that, and then take it into a reasonable part where it comes up to his house back here, and then at that point put concrete in front of the house again for the 30 foot in front of the house. That's what I was projecting to the city based on costing. Otherwise, the cost on that would be the same as putting a road in almost, and you're looking at a $40,000 to $50,000 driveway. By the time you have to go 350, 400 feet with concrete all the way out to the main road. The house itself is 1,819, I don't remember that number. Can I use your document? So, you only brought the one page. Okay, good. So the floor plan itself is 1,817 on the main. An additional finish ability is 1,700 in the basement, with a 3-car expanded garage of 865 square feet. So that's what he's projecting to build, and has a large covered patio in the back. It's actually a beautiful house. He saw one of my houses out in Waukee, and it was a custom I built for somebody. He saw it and he said, "That's the house I want." And so that's where this plan came from. He modified what he wanted in it, made the garage bigger and a few other things, and so that's where we started with that part of it as far as the plan goes, because there was a thing about the plan. So have I answered all of the questions that were kind of risen through this? What we wanted to do, what we were trying to ask for?
Would he relocate the house if we could get access off of the street? He's 37. Would he?
We're not going to be able to do that.
Oh, if we could gain access coming off
Curious,
27th, he would prefer that, because then he would have an all-concrete driveway coming off 27th right through, and that was he would prefer to have this first diagram. He really would, knowing that it's never going to be developed. I mean, it can't be developed. The lots weren't big enough because of city. The city had rules, and that's why this guy had to sell it the way he did, because he could never develop the ground to do what he wanted to do with it. And so in that concept, he would put it here if we could have access, or he would move it over here if the access was here. The reason we picked this access point was that's where the dead trees were. That's where the arborist said this is a great place to put a driveway. We did all that, and that's why we were trying to go there.
Otherwise, you've just gone to the middle of the lot, because there's some economies there for a driveway that's not 500 feet long.
Right. So one of the things is we have to put a septic system in, and have to be lateral fields with the city of Des Moines. So I'm going to have 120 foot, 4 lanes of 120 foot lateral fields coming off that right along this side here. We had it drawn in. we took that out, that's what this white is. And so those lateral fields are right here on that side of the property. And so since it's septic, with the lateral fields, it takes up a lot of the lot as well. A lot, 1 parcel and a half to put lateral fields in alone.
Would you have had to put those same in if the house was back in the corner where they talked about a year ago?
Then it would have still went, yes, because the higher side of the lot is to 27th Street.
East.
So it has to drain towards, no matter what, the drain fields are going to be back here.
Yeah.
If the house was sitting here, the drain field would still have been along here.
So Alan, the city utilities that serve this large complex of whatever it is to the east there, then those come from a different direction?
The electric and gas will be coming off from 27th.
Okay.
There's poles there that we'll have to pay for a transformer and get one set.
But the reason you have to do laterals, what,
There's no sewer system within.
Okay. So all the houses on East Peyton are on laterals?
They're all on septics.
On
laterals.
septics too. So I see that you don't want to turn the house to the east, facing east regardless, correct? To have the city staff would like to have
Well, if we can
front
have the
facade of
driveway,
the house face to the east was my understanding.
if the city could do something so I can get the driveway from southeast
No,
27th.
just stop right there.
Okay, 'cause
The city, I believe, still wants the house to face to the east regardless. Is that correct, Bert? Yeah, with the driveway coming up through Lot A from East Peyton, and then you would have more than likely, I think city staff was suggesting a side-loading garage that points to the south. But you probably don't want a house that faces to the east because there's no driveway. That's not the front yard.
Here goes-
So follow me through.
Yep, good.
So now you've got the house facing to the south, right? Straight down the driveway to the south,
Yes.
looking straight at the other people's backyards, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
which is all forested.
great. So then why not scoot the house further to the south so you can shorten the driveway length? How come you don't do that? If it's all forested and you can't see their backyards anyway, bring that house further to the south. And that can shorten your...
There's a crest. It doesn't
Okay.
show that. It's a crest where it kind of goes up into a hill.
Aren't you going to have to move some dirt work regardless by the time you dig a
He was trying to be on the
basement?
top of the hill. We could move it there. I don't have a problem moving it that way.
Okay.
That's easy.
All right, what I'm getting at is the distance that the driveway, quote, needs to be, part of that is your and your client's decision.
Right.
The house doesn't have to sit in the middle of the lot. It could come further to the south, could it not?
Yes.
Okay. But the last thing you want to do is turn it facing east. You don't
don't
want
wanna
to
face
do that.
east.
Okay, all right.
Because that's what they would look at.
Right,
Just
right,
backside
yeah,
of the
yeah,
lot.
yeah. It's just, yeah, there's no front yard there to have. Okay, I've got you. Okay, any other questions for Alan? Okay, all right. We will probably check back with you in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
We'll see what others have to say. Okay, first part of this is those that want to speak in support of the applicant, get up to 5 minutes. Anybody want to speak in support of the applicant's requests?
I'm not sure if it's in support of.
Okay. And we sometimes have that if there's nobody 100% in support. Are there any that are kind of in the middle? If you are, go ahead and step on up. And then we'll get to those that might be in opposition. And we just need your name, address, and you got up to 5 minutes.
I'm Richard Seabolt. I'm at 2640 East Peyton,
Okay?
which would be on it would be right here,
Gotcha.
this property.
Yep.
It's very unfortunate. This was very strange when I found out who owned that little strip of land. As I had talked with Mr. Costanda and understood what he's wanting to do with that property, and it sounded great to put his house back in that back corner, which is also, if you look at the site, that's the best site on the property to build a house as far as the way it's configured and the lay of the land. Just a little bit of information from the past. This was laid out, this property and the one behind it was all laid out with this 22-foot access off of Peyton. Then 22, I believe, of these little lots off of each side of that little 22-foot strip of land. And I believe I was told that one of the problems was that was not wide enough access to put all those houses off of that because it would basically be a street or a public drive. Nevertheless, my preference is for the house to be according to where it is on this driveway, on this drawing. Talking about being forested, facing our property and the property on the other side of the driveway, it's not forested to the extent that it's not very visible to our backyards. Secondly, and I don't know that there's anything the city can do, but far and away the best solution would be to have access off of 27th.
We can't do that.
Everything would look better that way, would make more sense. The city probably, since the city probably didn't have anything to do with letting them have that 5-foot strip of land to begin with, obviously the purpose of it was to prevent development along the west side of 27th Street. Nevertheless, I would be in favor of a paved driveway rather than gravel, just because of dust and appearance to the street and that type of thing. However, I would not necessarily support building a house right up close to the property line on the back side of our properties.
Right.
What I was hoping eventually would happen was that 22-foot strip of land would become unnecessary to that property and maybe be available for us and the neighbor on the other side of it to purchase it and get rid of that driveway altogether.
Yeah.
So those are that's my thinking, and I think it's probably understandable why I would prefer the location of the house to be further back. But it slopes. There's actually quite a wet area down in this area down in here. So that might be kind of interesting too, to see how that drains. But other than that, that's all I had. Just wanted to make the appearance.
And while you're here, Richard, to the best of your knowledge, does the entity that owns that narrow strip, do they maintain it properly? Is it mowed?
It's mowed, but I'm not sure. I mean, they mow all the property on their side of the street. I think they also mow that, although the neighbor that has the property behind this, the McIntoshes, I believe sometimes mow that as well.
Okay. So in general, it's relatively maintained based
It
on
is,
the
whether they're
lack of
doing it or the
development.
McIntoshes are doing it, I'm not sure, because
Okay.
sometimes Mr. McIntosh mows all the way up to,
Because if they weren't taking care of
pavement.
it, you could start yelling at them, and,
Right.
and maybe that'd be enough to get them to sell it. But that's nothing we can do here.
Now, I'm not sure also, the property, further back here, starting about here, is for sale, along with this 8 acres that's behind, north of the nursing home area. And I'm not sure if the people selling this property in this corner are the same people that own this property down here. It's kind of curious. There's a RE/MAX agent, Rivera. Rivera is a RE/MAX agent that has the property behind that strip it's kind of a pie-shaped piece in the corner that's for sale, along with the 8 acres that they intend to sell as 80-foot lots back there. But so I've been paying attention to this for quite a while, obviously, because I have a vested interest being right next door to it. When we looked at the property, I thought that's very odd that when I looked at the assessor's website and to see how this was all configured, I thought that's very strange. Obviously, they intended to develop all of that property behind this into small lots initially. But I was pleased that both of the owners behind us now plan to build one single-family residence on each property, which would be the best for our neighborhood. It's all acreages. From here west on East Peyton is all acreages, some of them 8 acres, some 4, but it's all pretty much large lots. Our 2 half-acre lots in front of this property are the smallest in that strip of older established residences. That's all I had. Just wanted to let you know my opinion.
All right, thank you for coming down today. Okay, anybody else speaking middle ground, or opposition?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Jim Ballard, 4007 Southeast 26th Street. I'm president of the East Lake Neighborhood Association, but we've not had a meeting to discuss a specific topic, so comments are either mine or historical based on what we've done. I remember talking about this property because of Prairie Hills. We were here when all that was done, and clearly the road was intended to go through to the north to Hart. I have no clue how 5 feet was left after they put the road in there. I don't really have a big issue with where they put a house on the property, and not so much even the orientation.
Okay.
The biggest issue I have is the driveway not being paved. I'm a little curious from things I've heard. So it sounded like whoever owns this piece of property would like to recoup some of the money they spent to put the road in, but it's guaranteed that if they don't deal with this one property here, there's going to be nobody going to have access off of 27th. I don't know if that leverage has been placed on them at all at this point in time.
So
It
there's
sounds
nothing
like-
for them to recoup then?
Yeah, there'd be zero
Right.
to recoup. They're
Right.
going to be
It's a
totally
bluff.
out of luck. If they don't deal now, they're going to totally miss out on anything. So that,
Right.
and it sounds like they've made a lot of attempts, and there's just been a lot of turnover with the people who have the property. I don't know if somebody from the city or somebody with other influence could have that discussion with them about this, or if a strip of property could be condemned there, to try or tell them that would be something we'd approach to force them to at least deal so they could get some money out of this. Because certainly the prospective homeowner builder is going to spend, as we said, $40,000 to $50,000 to put a driveway all the way up there, which seems to have some leverage to spend some money. I mean, I'm hoping that you're not going to approve a gravel driveway, which means we're talking about a $40,000 to $50,000 driveway probably, which then has some money now that we're talking about of what it could pay to get access to Southeast 27th. I mean, you're talking $50,000 this direction. Are you willing to pay $20,000? And have they given that number to those people to say, this is what we're willing to pay to get access or whatever? So that's my biggest issue, is the paved driveway. So.
Okay. Good points. Any questions for Mr. Ballard? Okay, thank you for coming down, Jim. Anybody else here to speak in opposition? Seeing none, any further questions for staff? Thank you, Bert. Yeah, hang on a second, I'll get there. All right, Bert, you have anything you want to add? I do have one question for you. If we were inclined to allow him to keep his house oriented to the south, like he's kind of proposing, what's the minimum setback he'd have to have from where the narrow part
These
hits?
are all considered side property lines.
Yes.
On this property, the only front property line is right
Weird.
here, so he could technically
Okay.
be within 7 to 10 feet.
So, which I was wondering about that. Yeah, because you use that narrow frontage way down south. That's the front yard.
Yeah.
A normal front yard setback would be how many feet back then?
Minimum would be about 30.
30. Okay. Okay. That's important for me to know. Thank you. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Bert? Okay, seeing none. Alan, you can have closing up to 3 minutes if you have any other facts or anything you want to say to assist Richard as the neighbor or...
That's great.
It's up to
Yeah,
you.
that's great. The only thing that I would say is moving the property forward. He's correct. It gets low. That's what I was talking about before. It gets low on that bottom side over here.
Right.
So if the house moves forward, knowing that you have a driveway parking pad per se in front of the house that's 30 feet this way. When you're on a regular lot in the city, 30-foot setback means that your house is 30 foot and that becomes your parking pad and your driveway. And I agree with Richard that if you move that house up so tight into the back of their properties, all you're looking at is their back window. of their house.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I
I'm
mean,
not
that just-
suggesting you do that necessarily.
Okay, I just wanted,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, and I agree with what he's saying, moving it that tight might be, that was it.
Right,
Thank you.
but right now, you have the house set back how far from what I'm gonna call that rear yard line of those other houses? Because you do have an arrow there, it looks like.
So.
Far is that setback?
And when I was meeting with the person at the city, he was talking to me about we would probably run as a minimum, and that's why we set it back that far, as a minimum from here.
Yes.
Use that as our line and have to back up from there.
And you have a number right in front of your fingernail there.
Right.
What,
Well,
what is
number
that?
That says 126, 128. Yeah, 128.
So is that how far it is from that
To the
midline
corner of the
back to
house to the property line.
Right.
And if we
Okay.
move that forward, even if, I mean, we can move it forward. I'm not saying we wouldn't move forward. I'm just saying that's what we had proposed at that time.
That's fine. I just wanted that for information, for perspective. Okay? Okay, so we'll close public portion, then go to board deliberation. So we may have a few different things to look at. There's a variance request here to not to have to gravel the driveway. And then there's some exceptions that they would need because staff wants to see the house turned. So, you want to tackle one thing at a time?
Yeah,
or-
I don't know that it's critical which direction the house faces, because there's only one way to
Okay.
access the ground.
So you want to tackle that exception first?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, all right. I
It's never
generally
gonna
agree.
come off at 27th Street.
Right, right,
So, and he's so far away from everybody,
right.
I'd say let's let him face his house however he wants to face it,
And the house is addressed on Peyton, I mean,
you know?
it makes sense.
Okay,
To me, that's something that's a no-brainer.
okay.
From my perspective, I don't want to speak for everybody else. I'm just saying, if he wants to face it, wherever he wants to face it, it doesn't matter because there's only one way in.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree. We've got a case here, staff references, an exception can be granted if it's necessary to permit the construction of a dwelling upon a lot of unusual shape or topography. And I'm going to stick on the unusual shape here. Yeah, these people are kind of screwed. We've got somebody holding hostage off 5 feet of property. And this board does not have the right to say, well, negotiate. Maybe if it's 10 grand here or 20 grand here, you guys should sit down. We cannot do that. We can only work off the existing ordinance and the existing layout of the existing parcels. So if you guys want to grant the exception,
And I think he's also made a point for having it that far back with the septic system. I mean, I don't know how many people live with a septic system, but you can't have a septic in a low-lying area.
Right.
It's going to cause lots of problems. So I think he's made a good argument for where it's at. I was also thinking earlier to put it forward, but when they mentioned about the low-lying area, it's going to cause more problems than it's worth, I think. So,
So do we need to make a motion on that then?
we
I
handle
think
it
we
bit by
should
bit.
wait.
I just want to make sure that we're clear about any other things that staff has in their staff rec about where and how the house will sit.
I think there's a lot of, I think there's consensus on the point that you just raised, Dave, but I guess I'd prefer to get them all lined up so we know exactly
Okay.
before we vote on, we'll just vote on all of it at once, just because there might be
Nathan's
some
got a good
interplay
point.
between the different requests.
That's fine, and
There are
that's why
connections.
Mel wanted to break them down one at a time, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not proposing a motion.
For
I don't know if we
discussion.
need- Yeah, I don't know if we need to make a motion for each discussion item.
No, but just to get the points out to see where the board feels now. So if we do go back to the front of the class here, the higher bar to get all over is the variance, and that's one of the requests here, which was to not have to do the paving of the driveway. What I was trying to get at here is, and I do agree with Mr. Ballard, at a minimum, and I think Richard as the neighbor said this, the distance between those, or the length between those two houses that are pre-existing, that should certainly be paved at a minimum. And if I use a little jump in logic here, if we consider where that midline is, whereas to me his front yard starts, he could have his house up to 30 feet from that front line. So he'd really only have to pave another 30 feet to meet the city's requirement to have that drive fully paved. And I would kind of like to see that. I'd like to say that, hey, he could have the house within 30 feet of that, but I'd like to see the full driveway paved. That's just me.
I was leaning more towards if you could pave in between the houses,
Okay?
and if the house sat where it sits,
Right.
you have gravel to a certain extent up
Okay.
until 30 feet in front of for padding in front of the garage, so you'd have the pavement that would appease the two homeowners on each side, the east and
Right.
west side there,
Yep,
up until where that line goes away, where it gets bigger.
right.
There's some gravel there, and then
Right.
the house
Yeah, see,
there.
he's showing the house 128 feet back. He's sitting here saying, well, that's because of the topography. But if he wants to save money on paving, then
But the closer you
Lay
bring,
the dirt.
the neighbors are kind of leery about that too, and
that's why I'd want it back a minimum of 30 feet, which is a normal front yard. Otherwise, according to staff, it could be within 7 feet, probably. See?
Well, I
Because
think it's already
I'm with
been
John.
discussed that there's low-lying area, you got the septic system, that it makes sense to put the house where it is. Not
Okay,
bring
if it
up.
does, and I'm not opposed to that, but then do you want to grant him an amendment to allow an intermediate portion that's gravel?
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree with what John's saying.
I do too.
I think that makes
there's a definitely
perfect
hardship
sense.
there in trying. I mean, this whole
Okay.
case is. a
That's kind of what
hardship.
I'm trying to feel out here. To a degree, yeah, you could, it's going to cost money, but you could
Gravel on his
pave the drive.
property, you know, and it's actually better with the septic system anyway to have.
And Alan, you don't have to answer this, but just nod. Would you still have a parking pad in front of the garage that's paved as well? That'd stick out 25, 30 feet or something? Okay.
I bet you
We
there's
could put that in
other
as a
lots out there that have gravel, just because of their age. In
Right.
this area, that's not unique.
But eventually,
Now,
we'll,
if I'm
we
the
should age
neighbor,
out
I
of it.
don't want the gravel,
Yeah.
obviously, on either
Okay.
side of my lot all the way. I get
Okay.
that.
All right, so if you guys are onto something here, for granting a variance on the gravel, and facing the house to the south, allowing for that, then what else do we've got to look at here before we get to motions?
Isn't that everything?
Well, staff has a condition under item 4, to require an attached two-car or detached two-car garage. I'm fine with that. But they've got provided it is to the west rear of the dwelling. It sounds like if we're not shifting the house, there's no need for us to say where that should be on the lot.
I think you should take out west and.
Just that
Yes.
short phrase there.
Or can
We
you
also
just-
have a paved driveway shall be provided for vehicular access to the garage. Well, that goes back,
I mean, the
that kind of
west,
ties back into the variance a little, doesn't it, Glenna?
It does.
Okay. So you'd have to,
take out the west rear.
yep. And then you'd have to take out a paved driveway shall be provided and then list how you feel that driveway should be.
Well, that's where we could put something like the paved pad
Okay?
must be
All
provided.
right.
I don't know how you normally define that, but
And then you'd also want to require that that portion of Lot A that is to the south of the neighbor's rear yard shall be paved yet.
I think that's where, I think we'd probably put that in the variance approval
Okay.
as a
Okay.
condition on the variance.
Yep.
So are we talking about as per the drawing? This is how the house is going to be oriented. This is where the garage is going to be located.
Yeah, it could face to the south.
And then you're going to say so much of the driveway from the south or the pad,
That's
needs to
probably
be
what you're going
paved.
to say. Yeah.
huh?
That's probably what, yeah.
And then so much from, coming from the south to the north is going to have to be paved from.
To the neighbor's rear yard.
Yeah.
line. Yeah.
So there's going to be basically some gravel in between.
Say the rear property line, because I mean,
Yeah, to the rear property
just wanna
line of
make
the
sure I
neighbor.
understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
the address is to the south. Yeah. Yeah. Does that make sense? We good?
Yes.
If this is what somebody wants to do as a motion.
On page 12 of the staff recommendation, condition number 2, I'm not sure whether that has been addressed or not. That is the
Right.
construction of the dwelling with the front facade no further than 25 feet from the east property line.
Yeah, if we were looking to grant an exception to the direction it faces, we'd be granting the exception and removing 2, right?
Yep.
because we've already discussed that we're okay with removing that.
Correct.
Yes.
2 would be removed. Well, unless
Yeah.
Bert thinks differently.
I would clarify, if the house is oriented like this, it actually
Yep.
faces the public street.
Yes.
So then that exception isn't necessary. The exception
Right.
to the facing the public street is only necessary if you go with our staff recommendation to face it.
Which we're not.
East,
Yeah.
which
Uh,
you're
or,
not.
well, it sounds like
Right.
the discussion might not go that way. We'll
So
see.
you're saying, Bert, that the exception, the second bullet pointed exception on the agenda is moot.
It's moot right at this point.
We
If
should
the-
grant
move
the
it because it
exception
says the
be
house
done.
will face east.
So are there any exceptions? Is the front door exception?
If you go with this layout, you don't need that exception because it appears to face this street. The exception is only necessary if it faces that way, since there's that private strip of land.
That's for
in
both of the
between.
exception requests. That's for both of the exception
Well,
requests or
It
the,
Well,
still
yeah,
needs
'cause-
the exception to the lot width because it's
The
considered a
58.
flag lot, so it
Okay.
needs the exception of 50.
So we would want to grant that.
You would need to
okay.
grant it.
Yeah, we'd actually look to grant both then. Right? Both of those exceptions.
Well, the exception, I think Bert's point is that if you're going to allow the layout that's shown on the screen.
Yes.
That second exception is not necessary.
It's not necessary,
And my
but-
point
Okay.
was that if you're going to allow the layout on the screen, condition number 2 needs to be stricken,
Just
correct?
goes away.
That's true.
Okay,
Just delete that.
all right. Nathan, that makes sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
let me ask,
Yeah.
can I ask one more question? On item 10,
Okay.
who's going to put the sewer in, and are they going to make every one of the neighbors connect to that then, or just this guy?
Yeah, Bert, help us out. Is that a city
Yeah,
requirement?
that's actually a requirement anyway.
Okay.
If the septic fails and they have to put in a new septic system, when they take out the permit for that, the city looks to see if there's a sewer within, I forget if it's 300 or 600 feet, and if there's a sewer that's within 300 or 600 feet, then they have to connect to the sewer and they can't put in a new septic
So you
system.
get one shot at a septic,
Yeah,
basically?
it's a good summary.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, because there's not one close enough now, or
There's
you'd
not
make a
one right
mocha.
now.
And,
But
and
if
that-
it fails and there's not one near a public sewer, they can replace the septic.
Right.
So,
Alan will design it right. And
and
won't.
does that hold true for the neighbors as well?
That's true for the neighbors.
Because they're going to have to pull a
Anybody
permit
there-
if their septic fails.
And there
Okay.
is a sewer within
Okay,
the minimum,
X feet.
maximum number of feet, yeah.
got it.
All right, somebody want to try a motion here?
I'll move that we approve the variance, subject to, I don't know if there are additional conditions that, I know this is not a variance we grant very often, so maybe there aren't stock recommendations, but at least subject to a requirement that they do pave the first, what it was, at 200 feet from the property line? Was that what he said?
to the rear property line of the
That would be
neighbors.
commensurate with the, yeah, rear property line, the lateral extent of the rear property lines.
Yeah.
The East Peyton.
As well as the kind of access parking pad adjacent to the house. And then I also move to grant the exception for 58 feet less than the minimum 80-foot lot width, subject to the exceptions listed on pages 12 and 13, except for not number 2, and editing number 4 to delete everything after the word, well, it should just read provision of an attached two-car garage or provision of a detached two-car garage. I guess it should probably read two-car or more, of at least a two-car garage, something like that. And I think everything else is. And then, I guess, denial of the other exception because it's not needed.
That sounds clear for our attorney, from an attorney, and the attorney, clear by the
I
attorney.
think your question was going to be, can you vote on all at once? And yes, you can.
Okay, so we can vote on the variance and exception all together. Okay.
Do you have to speak to the drawing and the orientation of the house as per the drawing or anything like that?
Not necessarily.
We've basically given him an allowance to kind of orient it the way he wants.
Okay.
Whatever that
Well,
might
assuming
be.
that he wants it to do it south. If he did want to do it east, which he says he doesn't, then this exception that we're denying would not allow him to do that anymore.
And that's
That's
why I
true.
wanted to, I'm just asking the
Yeah.
question,
That's true.
not trying to complicate it.
I mean, I guess we could grant it. I don't have a problem with that.
I would assume he wants to build what he's showing us here. And
Right.
Let him face it any
many times we
direction
say
he
that,
wants.
so I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm
Let-
just
well,
asking,
let-
if
let's-
that's irrelevant, Mel.
I'll amend mine to say we'll grant that exception if they choose to use it.
Yeah, because they might decide to.
Switch it around, given,
Switch it around.
yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
That
Clear
way they
enough,
don't have to
Glenna?
come back.
yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay, John's going to second that motion. All in favor of granting the requested variances and exceptions, subject to the recommendations noted, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Nays, just one. It's only in principle, I still like what you're doing. Okay, motion carries 6-1. So, should have a nice house down there, and you get to have some gravel in the in-between segment, okay? All right, thanks for coming down today. Richard, thank you again for coming down, as two good neighbors there. All right, that'll bring us to item 4, a conditional use permit variance and exception request at 440 East Grand Avenue.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Catherine Dostart, City Planner. The item in front of us is a request for tavern use and sign at a building that's being renovated along East Grand at the corner of East Grand and East, 5th Street. Let's see. Part of what's happening here is this building is oriented on a slope and presents some interesting challenges when it comes to number of stories. So we're having a little fun with that today. So as you'll see from the front, it's been determined that this is a 2-story building on the front facade of the building. But then when you look at the location of the proposed tavern, it appears to be on the first floor of the building. Now the applicant is asking for signage along the, so it would be on the east side, thank you. It would just be on the east side, but because they've been determined to be on the second floor, they're only allowed a very small amount, and so they're asking for a bigger sign so that they could actually be visible from the principal street on this parcel. They don't have a design yet that they've been able to provide us with, but if you look closely, you can see that it would be about located up along the side of the building and then just right there.
That looks pretty big. Sorry.
And then they are also proposing to turn this into a tavern use. Let's see if there's anything else that I really need to give you. Right now, staff is recommending approval of the request. We just have the standard conditions on the tavern, and we are also recommending approval of the request for the sign. The 2 conditions that point out, because these are standard conditions, we'll only go over to the 2, are 8 and number 10. Number 8 just says that if the tavern becomes an issue, any issue that can come back, but if the zoning enforcement officer determines at any time that the operation becomes a nuisance or exhibits a pattern of violating the conditions, it can come back to the board. And then because this is a historic building or using historic credits, any sign that they put up would be subject to any requirements of the State Historic Preservation Office. We had 2 cards which are going around in support of the project, so just locate it to the south there. And we do have a copy of the police report, but because this is a new building, there's nothing associated with it. So if I can answer any questions.
Yeah, so the request was for a variance of 23 feet over the 2 square feet that are usually given. Is that because 25 feet would be normally what they would earn if it was a 2-story, or if they're on the first story? Because it looked like the little drawing that you had actually only required 4 feet.
Yeah, when they filed the application, they weren't sure what their sign was going to be, so they asked for a 25 square foot sign. Then I think I just got this drawing yesterday or maybe Monday.
Okay.
So this shows.
I mean, we can talk with them, but maybe they're okay with like a...
But, yeah, if you do a variance of 2 over 2.
Yeah.
If they're truly only doing 4.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah, because right now that's 4 square feet.
Right.
Versus if it could be 5 by 5.
Yeah.
Potentially with that exception. So, and ironically, we've had a lot of sign stuff here in the last few months, but hey, this is about opening a tavern. I'm a little more interested in that. So do you have a floor plan for what they want to do? And maybe the applicant will show that, but you know.
I do. Give me just one moment,
If we're going to have another rave nightclub with 1,000 people in it, I might be a little more concerned.
Well, if we don't give them the sign, people won't know how to find it. So they won't have 1,000.
Okay, this is the floor plan here.
This is the floor plan provided. The facade along the left edge of the paper is the southern facade facing East Grand, and then the main entrance would be on the east side, facing, or on the eastern facade, which is facing the bottom of the paper right now. And then they've just got some standard areas.
Okay. Easy enough there. Okay. Any questions for Catherine? All right. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, applicant or representative of the applicant, you guys can go. We just need your name, address, tell us about your bar, tell us about your sign.
You betcha. My name is Kyle McLean. I live at 509 56th Street. My partner and I own Hello Marjorie over there in the Des Moines Register and Tribune building. We would like to do something, I guess, for lack of terms, very similar to that style of tavern over in the East Village. Our main focus for Hello Marjorie is classic cocktails, and it's in a home. This will be a tiki cocktail lounge, so similar drinks but more tiki flavored, so it's got more juices and it's focused on rums rather than whiskeys and bourbons. And we would do a 60s themed hotel is kind of what we're gearing towards. Just the interior lobby would what it would look like. It's not a hotel, there would be nobody staying in it. It would just take on that hotel lobby look. Center bar, it would hold under 100 people. But it would be very similar to Hello Marjorie. It would be a cocktail lounge. It would not be a high volume bar. Just bringing a similar concept to a different area of town.
It's not a meat market rave nightclub?
I think our price point would probably be too high for that, for a majority of what we do. It's held true for Marjorie so far. You could look up the record there. We're pretty low key, I would say. So
a guy like Don Draper would hang out at this place, right?
Exactly.
Everybody
Yes,
gets
sir.
that. Yeah. Okay.
The signage, plain and simple, when I signed up for it, we didn't know how big it was, and I was advised to go big or go home. So take as much as I needed, and then we could scale back from that. We're working on a design, but it's literally just kind of one of the very small off to the side, similar to what St. Kilda has over off of Walnut. It would just be small. It'd have a little bit of color, and once we get that, obviously it has to get approved by SHPO and everything like that. So I don't think we'd even be allowed to do anything outlandish with their standards as well. But going off of our Hello Marjorie theme, we're not really in your face style, so that would not be.
So you'd be allowed 20 square feet to begin with, like a 4x5.
We were told to request a variance because they could not decide if we were technically first floor or
the
second
first or
floor.
second, okay.
And since they determined we were most likely second floor, we had to apply for a variance regardless of the size.
All right, gotcha. Cool. Excellent, Kyle.
That's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, anybody else here to speak in support? If they so choose to, if not, no worries. Anybody speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, any further questions for staff? If none, we'll close public portion, go to board deliberation.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Okay,
Second that.
any other discussion? Going once, going twice, seeing none. We got a motion and a second to grant the conditional use permit, the variance and exceptions as presented. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? One. Okay, variance.
Yeah, I don't think they meet the variance test.
Okay, all right. Jack up the price on his drink when he comes in. Okay.
I'm sure I'll be there. It's a matter. The city needs to change their code. But.
Motion carries 6-1. All right. Thanks for what you were doing there at the Register Building, and we'll look forward to seeing you in East Village. You bet. Okay, that'll bring us to item number 5. 5 is a variance request at 3816 Ingersoll Avenue.
All right. Item number 5 is a variance to the definition of freestanding monument sign. It's for a CPA office on the south side of Ingersoll between 38th and 39th Street. They are wanting to reuse an existing sign base. So here's what it currently looks like. And it doesn't meet our definition because it doesn't have the 2 feet of height below the entire width of the sign. So,
Is it just because it's only on the right
they
side?
have the 2 feet at the north end of the sign, but then as you move back, it slopes, and they don't have the full 2 feet. So here's a photo of what it looks like. So
Do you know if it's all brick down there?
I don't know, and that's
Sure,
our,
just dig back a little.
our staff recommendation had to be for denial because it's a monument sign. We always uphold the.
Yeah.
You're so literal.
We have to uphold a very literal interpretation of the ordinance. So we have recommended denial. We don't know if there's an opportunity to dig some of this dirt out to get the 2 feet across the entire width of the sign, or their other option would be to add another foot of brick.
Sloping.
So, yeah, so I was the lucky one who gets to stand up here and recommend denial of otherwise attractive sign. So we have recommended denial just because we didn't feel that it met the test of a variance. On that last sign, you remember it was a variance of a signage area. However, we felt that it was reasonable to have more than 2 square feet, and that's why we were able to support that variance, was because they only earned 2 square feet of signage, and we didn't feel 2 square feet was reasonable. But in this case, we just didn't feel that they met the variance test.
Interesting.
Okay, straightforward enough. All right, thanks, Bert. Okay, applicant or representative of the applicant, step on up. Thanks for waiting. Good afternoon.
I'm Dustin Shannon, 971 Northeast Broadway. So in 2009, the company I work for fabricated and installed this. The brick base it is stair-stepped, so we don't have the option to dig down because after about 6 inches, we'll run into the actual footing, and it's not clean and smooth to where we can wrap it in brick. Also, if we add height to it, it would put us over the 8-foot minimum requirement since it is an envision triangle. So all that we ask is that we're able to keep the monument sign or the base the same, so we can do essentially new faces, new paint job, and update it with some LEDs. Layout will look identical. It will just be fresh, essentially.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Straightforward enough.
Yeah.
Any questions for Dustin? Okay, we got it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anybody here to speak in support of the applicant? All right. I figured you had to be pro or con on this one if you were still here. Good afternoon.
All right, this building is titled under an LLC. I'm the managing member or the ultimate owner.
Can we have your name and address for the record?
Yeah, sure. My name is Steve Howe. I am the managing manager, managing member of SH Property LLC, which is the legal owner of this building.
Yeah.
Okay, and you saw the one side of the sign. I'm going to show you the other side. Where do I put that?
Right on top of that picture.
Right on top, yeah. Okay, and as you can see, so if we were to dig another 2 feet down, we're going to have to do both sides. Okay, and on this side, the other side might be with this retaining wall on there, so we just redo the retaining wall. I do not know how we're going to do this side, right? So that's what the whole picture is from both sides. And also, I should mention that this was built in 2009 in compliance with the code then. And the new code would be triggered if we take this frame off the sign. Right now, nothing is taken off. It's still in compliance. So if we were to leave the sign the way it is, don't touch it. Right. We are perfectly fine. Okay. So now, so we're just doing repairing now to the pole and with reusing the same frame. It's really a maintenance issue, not replacing a sign. And just like when you do car paint, and you want to take to the shop to paint rather than just paint it on your garage or something, okay? So we could, even if we want to paint it, first of all, if we don't paint it, it's still okay. But even if we want to paint it, we can leave it there, just paint it with the frame in place. Then I wouldn't even need to come here. Yeah, I guess the only other point was, so if we were to raise the brick, that would trigger, exceed the overall height. So I think that's all the points I have.
Okay. All right. Well put. Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody here to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? Seeing none, do we have any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board deliberation.
Well, on number 2, it says that the criteria to consider is the plight of the owners due to unique circumstances, not the owner's own making. The landscaping requires this, and as I said, if they go 2 feet above, for the one end, it's going to be too high. I think it's been working. It looks good. I think it is due to conditions of the land and expecting them to dig it out just to make it look according to some things. I think this meets the intention of the code.
One of the, and I agree with you on that, some backgrounds on granting the variance. One, it can't be contrary to the public interest. This would not be. And one thing, and we don't hit on this a lot, but that a literal enforcement of the regulation would result in an unnecessary hardship. Well, this is truly a literal enforcement. We have a brick base here. It kind of meets the intent of, I think, what the ordinance was here for, not literally. And that it won't alter the essential character of the land in question. It's going to fit right in and look just fine. That's some of the variance test requirements. Maybe not every single one, but the common sense approach would be, if I drove by this, I'd go, okay, we got a monument sign, cool, looks good. We granted something like this at Christ the King on Southwest 9th and Porter, where they had a existing brick base, and they were trying to meet the intent. Wasn't quite high enough or something, but I get what they're doing here. Dave?
I just think this just demonstrates that we've continued to discuss these signs. There's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's certainly how the ordinance is written. So I'd make a motion that we let them fix the sign they want to fix it with the base that they've got.
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to grant the requested variance. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, man, I tried to convince you. Okay, all right, motion carries.
Just because you get 2 out of 3 doesn't mean.
Motion carries 6-1. We're all good sports.
You have to get all
here.
3.
All 3. All right, thanks for coming in today, guys. Just make sure that anything else you do with the sign is accordance with your sign permits, including the lighting and LEDs and how they can work and how long they can be on, all that stuff. Okay? Right. You make him earn his money. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Have a good holiday. Okay, is there any other new business, Bert? Any other new business? Okay, for old business, we've got approved minutes from the last meeting. Anyone here from the last meeting with any questions, concerns? If not, would there be a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Motion by Cindy, second by Marlis. All those that were here last month, raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Favor? Okay, that's 5. And any opposed? None. 1 abstention because he wasn't here. Okay.
5 or 6 who voted in favor.
6 then. That's right. 6. I voted in favor too. Okay. So 6-0 to approve
Touch and
the
go
minutes. Bert, you handed out the schedule for last year at last month's meeting. Okay.
And it came in the middle.
When do we elect officers for the year? That's in April. Okay, so as we close out 2018, we're good. Okay, all right, there may be an appointment later today. Hope you're all there. This hearing is adjourned.
An appointment where?
Oh, come on.
I had.
I was thinking like